Good morning. It's Sunday, March 22nd. I'm Ali Velshi, and we begin this hour with important work this week. Mark this on your calendar. Next Saturday, March 28th, will be the next No Kings protest. It'll be the third time that the No Kings Coalition has organized a nationwide day of action, this one inspired by the federal government's violent and deadly immigration crackdown in Minnesota earlier this year, which is why No Kings organizers chose St. Paul, which is Minnesota's capital, as the site of its national flagship event this time around. It's also a testament to the power of your voice for bearing witness to the government's actions. The outcry that erupted against the immigration operations in Minneapolis-St. Paul forced the White House to scale back its operation. At its height, more than 3,000 federal agents were deployed across the state. Today, fewer than 1,000 remain. Ultimately, it also led to the firing of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Americans, including you at home watching this, have done a lot to provide a backstop to many of Trump's abuses of power. So let's back up for a second and remember what else has been achieved so far. At this point last year, just 2 months into the second Trump administration, no large-scale effort had materialized yet to counter Trump, but the seeds of a movement were beginning to sprout. Small clusters of people around the country were getting together to protest the anti-democratic actions that Donald Trump had promised to take and had started to take upon his return to power. Some people gathered at Tesla dealerships and elsewhere to demonstrate against Elon Musk and Doge, who were empowered by Trump to fire government workers and to slash federal budgets. Americans began confronting Republican members of Congress at tense town halls, questioning them about their lack of resistance to the White House's actions and the flurry of executive orders that Trump signed in an attempt to impose his repressive, anti-diversity, anti-immigrant ideology. At least until Republicans just stopped showing up altogether, because they were advised by their national leadership to avoid meeting and talking with their constituents at town halls because the viral videos of those encounters were making Republicans look bad. This was all happening largely organically around the country during those first few months of Trump's return to the White House. But Trump didn't seem to care. He didn't seem all that bothered by the growing opposition to his presidency. In fact, at some points, he seemed to revel in it. In February of last year, the White House's social media account posted this image. He really likes fake Time magazine covers, but this was a fake magazine cover that showed Donald Trump wearing a crown. On the bottom left corner, it read, "Long live the king." Then came June 14th, 2025. That was the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. Also happened to be Trump's 79th birthday. The government held a military parade on the streets of Washington, D.C., the kind of posturing you typically see in places like China and Russia and North Korea, countries where strong men rule. They brought in tanks. They flew warplanes. About 7,000 soldiers participated in this thing. However, it was poorly attended and overall a pretty dismal affair. I know that personally because I was there that day near the Washington Monument, covering it for hours and hours that I will never get back in my life. But elsewhere in the country, on that very same day, and I was stuck at that parade, the first No Kings protests were taking place. An estimated 5 million people participated in marches and other No Kings-related events, far more than the number of people who turned out for Trump's military parade. In fact, it was one of the single largest single-day protests in American history. But it would be eclipsed itself just 4 months later by the second No Kings Day protests on October 18th. 7 million people are estimated to have taken to the streets again to continue this work. They rallied for the immigrant families who were being separated and detained, sometimes without due process, the students who were arrested and detained for calling for an end to the war in Gaza, the people living below the poverty line whose benefits, including health care and nutrition assistance, were taken away from them. The residents of Los Angeles and Portland and other American cities who didn't want or need federal troops in their streets. Americans have stepped up. Every single act of injustice has been met with a response from the public. As a result, Mahmoud Khalil and Rumeysa Ozturk, 2 immigrant students who were detained simply for advocating for the people of Gaza, have been freed from detention. Trump's mass deportation operations have slowed, frustrated by the wall of resistance that Americans have put up in defense of immigrant communities. The attempts to deploy federal troops have encountered legal challenges that have largely blocked the administration from enacting a police state in America. But there is much more work to do. The Trump administration has launched a war of choice in Iran, seemingly to distract Americans from his failings here at home. And he continues to antagonize other countries, including our allies. The economy remains on very shaky ground. Housing and cost of living remain unaffordable for millions of Americans. The government doesn't seem to be doing anything about those problems. This is where you come in. More than 3,000 No Kings related events are planned for the country on Saturday, 6 days from now. This is at least a few hundred more than the last time, a sign of how big this movement is and how it's continuing to grow. What started out as a demonstration against Trump's aspirations to rule like a king has been transformed into a movement to safeguard democracy from his tyrannical policies. There will be events in small towns and the biggest of cities. Chances are something's happening very close to where you live. And if you don't like what Donald Trump and his administration are turning this country into, join one of these events. Make a poster, bring a friend, meet the members of your community. The work must continue. Every moment we do this builds upon the movements that came before. The late Congressman and civil rights activist John Lewis left us with this lesson, quote, "Ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one judicial appointment or presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, and maybe even many lifetimes. And each one of us in every generation must do our part," end quote.